everybody, how are you going today? It is magnificent to see you, and today we are out shooting with the 28-75 2.8. Have to send it back to Nikon very soon, but tonight have I got a treat for you. I am going to go to 3 different locations and I am going to compare the 28-75, not with 1, not with 2, not with 3, but with 5 different lenses that cover that range. This is going to be nuts, but this is what we're doing. And how do I do it? Well, I do it real world style. So we're just going to shoot, we're going to see what they look like. There's no test charts, there's none of that stuff. Join me on the Z9, we're shooting in RAW, full, lossless, compressed RAW. I'm going to start, well, I should actually start with the lens that we're talking about, shouldn't I? So I'll take off the 24-120. It's going to be epic. I can't wait to go through them with you because I've got some really interesting lenses here. There's a few curveballs that are going to come out at the end. All right, here we go. So now the light will change between these shots, and that's okay. That's with this one. The next one we will be in darkness. Here we are with the 28-75 2.8. We're going to do every lens wide open. That's what we're going to do, and I will adjust for exposure later on in post. That's what we're going to do. The settings will remain the same. 3 shots. 1 shot, 2 shot, 3 shot. There's a 2-second delay so the camera can calm down. All right, off the 24-70 2.8. So what we'll see here is the frame is a little wider, but hopefully we don't see much else in the way of differences. Okay, 1, 2, and what we're doing is we're shooting at base ISO, half a second at f2.8, wide open. Okay, that one's done. 24-70 f4. And off we go. 1. And you know what? I've changed my mind. I will drop this one to 1 second so that we don't have to do anything in post. Although the light is slowly fading. So there will be some slight variances between these shots. And I suppose the fact that this is going for half a second longer, there's the potential for vibration, wind, but I'm hoping not. All right, that is number 3. Okay, next we're going to go the 24-120. And just so you're sure, there's like 10 seconds lens changeovers, then we're just going straight into the next one. So all the stuff is going to be taken in real time in the space of probably less than 5 minutes. And yes, the light is fading. The good old 24-70 2.8 f VR2, or sorry, just VR, not VR2. And here it is. All right, there you go. Noisy, very different camera, very different lens to use. Here comes the tram. We'll get an extra shot for the tram. There it is. Great. All right, that's it done. Now the lens that I was hoping was the Sony 24-120. Unfortunately, the Z9, I reckon this thing needs a firmware update for the Z9. So we will use this one next time I do some testing. It's probably enough, isn't it?
Well, let's take a look at all of these amazing lenses, starting with here, the 28-75. We can see it here. Then we have the 24-70 2.8, the 24-70 f4, the 24-120 f4, and the original VR 24-70 2.8E for the F mount. And we can see across the board here, they all look pretty similar, don't they? For color and so on, I've applied the same settings across all of them. I just thought we'd have a quick look full frame. That's just drawing in. Sorry, my computer's a little slow. We can see the frame changes size a little bit, which is something that we will talk about later on in this video. There's the 24-120, and finally we have the 24-70 to 70 f-mount lens. Now I just want to jump into the settings here for a second and show you that this is at 1 second 2.8 and the other 2.8s are at a half second 2.8. Now the reason for this is I changed it to 1 second in order to get the exposure right for the f4 versus the 2.8, and unfortunately I didn't put it back. So what I'm doing here in post is I'm dropping the exposure by 1 stop. Now, is it as accurate as doing it in camera, and what are the impacts of that? Well, to be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure. I've never done a 5 lens comparison. I suspect there are some differences, but it won't change sharpness, focus, chromatic aberration, and so on. And that is what we're going to look at with this image. So let's jump into the 5, and I just want you again to look over here at these settings and note that none of them change at all except the final lens, where I've adjusted for that error in exposure. Not even the color temperature is adjusted. Okay, so there we are. Focus from all of the images, we can see that it's in exactly the same area. We're at 200%, out to 100%. There it is, pretty close to the bridge, out to full image. And that just gives us an idea of what we're looking at and where the focus point was. Let's look at the 5 images a little bit closer up. Okay, let's go into 200%. Now that's the corner, but there's not a lot to look at there. So we're going to go sort of the bottom third of the screen. Okay, so there are our 5 lenses. Now we can see, of course, this is a 28. So the edge of this frame here is a little bit different. We can't get all the way over, and what we're actually looking at is there. But right now, let's just try and have a look at this edge sharpness. So what we can see on this lens here is it's very soft all the way through along this fence. On the 2.8, we can see that it starts to kind of get sharper as we get towards the middle and second half here. Also, looking at just the jitteriness of these lights on the edge, this one's not very jittery and this one's very jittery. These are both 2.8s, and I suppose we could compare this one as well and see that I don't think this one's as sharp here or here, and I do believe there's a little bit more chromatic aberration going on. But let's look at these f4 lenses. Now, obviously we have the disadvantage of having one less stop, but they look great. I would say that f4 wide open, of course, logically, f4 wide open is going to be sharper. And that's an advantage of that being your minimum aperture. It is sharper. But across the 3 2.8s, definitely the Z lens is the sharpest. Definitely the 24-70 2.8 is the sharpest of the 3 2.8s. And these two, well, they're sharper because they're f4s. Looking at chromatic aberration, it's pretty similar across all of these lenses. Let's go into 400% though. Lights closest to the left-hand side of the frame in the bottom third. I would say this is not only a jittery sort of situation going on here, chromatic aberration is, you know, it's not too bad. This one's okay. I'd say this one's a little bit worse. This one and this one are similar. The f4s and the old f-mount lens has also a pretty large degree of chromatic aberration. And I do think it's interesting to see how they do it differently, but I do think that this handles it the best of all of them. So what we can see here across the board, when you're at 2.8, yes, the lens that's twice the price is definitely better when it comes to sharpness towards the edges and when it comes to chromatic aberration. Let's jump back out. Okay, let's look at sharpness here at this light because we're pretty close to our focus point here, and we're going to go into 400% again. And we can see here the 28 to 75. It's not as sharp, I don't think. I don't think it's rendering quite as well. And also we can certainly see a lot of aberration around the edge of that light. Flaring across all these lenses is actually similar. Something I do want to note is perhaps the 24 to 120 is flaring the least. And let's just keep an eye on that lens because I think it's a pretty special lens. Now the 24 to 72.8S lens is doing a great job. Look at that. I don't think I can see any chromatic aberration here at 400%, or if there is some, it's extraordinarily mild. There's a little bit of it here with the 24 to 70 f4. Like I said, this one is suppressing it very, very well. And the good old f-mount version is doing a great job as well, but perhaps flaring slightly more. Now on this one, I just wanted to look at we're at 100% on each lens, and I just wanted to look at really how are they rendering? You know, which one is actually rendering the scene the nicest. Now, let's have a look. Everything stays in sequence. This is the 28 to 75 2.8, and I think it's doing a pretty reasonable job. But if we just go through these, I definitely think, if you look up here in the church area, it's sharper, the rendition, the dimensionality. It's definitely sharper, as are these two. But again, they're f4s versus 2.8s, so they should be sharper. So this is what happens when you're shooting wide open. The advantage of losing a stop, you're actually going to get a sharper shot through the image. Is that important to you? But I actually think if you look at these two, this one is actually rendering, I think, better than the 24 to 70 f4. Now this is minor stuff, but you can see it. And here, I think the old f-mount lens is showing its age a little bit here, and it's a lot more jittery. It's a lot less sharp. The renditions are just not quite there in the same way. That's looking at it close up and pixel peeping. But if you jump out to the full image, are you really going to know the difference with any of these? Would it really matter at the end of the day? Like, I could probably choose one of these images at random and hide the area on the right so you didn't know which one I was choosing. And it could well be that you don't really know which lens I'm on. So I am a massive advocate of, it's all about the shot first, and how sharp it might be in the corners or not kind of really doesn't make any difference if you get an amazing shot. But this is just so you can be informed to make the choice. How do you want to spend your money? Do you want to spend your money on more lenses, or do you want to spend your money on the sharpest lenses? It's really interesting, but the 24 to 120 f4 is certainly shining through for me. And of course, it is the newest S-class lens in this set of 5 lenses that we're looking at. Now, one last thing that we might want to look at before we jump out is vignetting in the corners. Now, we can see a little bit of it there. They're all doing it, and it's interesting. That could be corrected away algorithmically, and a choice is being made for that not to happen. And obviously it's something that we can fix really easily. So it's something that I don't really worry about anymore, because it's just so simple to fix in this digital age. Let me know in the comments, which one do you think looks best in this image? Okay, we are now in location number 2. All right, here is the 28-75. And this shot has been framed for the purposes of a 24. It's not going to look quite the same, which I suppose is what this is all about, isn't it? It's saying you can't get as much. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to go to 6.3 on all of the lenses. So we've got to increase our exposure to 1 second. Okay, so that is the 28 to 75. Now we're going to do a quick 8K video, and we're just going to do that wide open. And next is the 24 to 70 2.8. Now this is a spectacular lens. Here's the thing, you're a tourist, you're out shooting, are you going to see anything different? Now we're going to go over to stills. This is the 24 to 70 f4. And 2, we do have some car lights changing things slightly, but that's okay, that's part of the real world. Lovely. Now we're going to go to 6.3, and we need to go to 2 seconds on this lens. Okay, now we're going over to 8K video. Because of the difference in aperture, we're going to 6400 ISO. The ISOs are very good. The high ISOs, I think, are very good on this camera. I don't think we're going to see much difference between 3200 and 6400 in this particular scenario. 24 to 120. I'm glad you remembered. You're on it. On it. I'm on it. And last but not least, we have the good old left to Z adapter. It's going to put a little bit of weight on this. It doesn't move things much. This is pretty cool for... It's all good, it's all good, it's all good. No, you don't have to apologise. It's our city, all of ours. Interestingly, this is the F lens, and it's a whole different story as to how it focuses and everything that works. I'm reviewing the images between the original 24 to 70 2.8
And I had always wondered, did they distortion correct in video? They don't, not on this lens anyway. So this will be really interesting to see when we look at all of them. I can have a quick look here actually, and I'll be able to see. So my question is going to be, do they distortion correct video on all the lenses? It was a question that I had, and it might be being answered right here, right now. Wow. Okay. So they distortion correct the Z lenses, they don't distortion correct the F lenses.
I'm just going to jump in here for a second and say that what we know from this is shooting in 8K, because I didn't test this in 4K, that the F lens is not distortion corrected. So only in 8K do I know that. It might be the same in 4K. Also, this is something that could be fixed in firmware. It wouldn't be a major priority to be getting this sort of thing sorted out first when the Z9 comes out. We are at very early days with the Z9. So this still might be something that happens in the future.
That's cool.
Here we are looking at our second setup, and we can see we have our 5 lenses, and well, they all look pretty good, don't they? Let's look at them full size first. So there is the 28 to 75 2.8. It's a lovely rendition, and you would be very happy if you brought a file like that home from your world trip or your walk around town. The 24 to 70 2.8 S-class lens, again, you'd be very happy with that. The 24 to 70 f4, and looking great. Is it different? It's hard to tell, but I think right now all of these lenses are looking pretty similar. This is a very sharp lens. Now, the exposure has been adjusted to compensate for the fact that this is an f4. This is something interesting that I noted, that the 24 to 120 is significantly wider. If we look here, where it says focal length, and we can most definitely see that they are both at 24. The 24 to 120 is significantly wider. I decided to jump into the latest version of NX Studio. Now, the first thing that I want to show you is with these files that this here is the focus point. So if we just go to one image, we can see clearly the focus point is here on the B in bar. The other thing I wanted to look at is the size of the frame. Now, the size of the frame was something that I was talking about, but what we can see here is that obviously the 28 to 75 is what it is. That makes complete sense. But what we can see here is that the 24 to 70 is not as wide as the 2f4 lenses. That's the 2f4 lenses, and they are the widest. So I'm wondering if there's something about an f4 construction which allows you to get a wider frame. What's happening here is the way that Capture One is interpreting the 24 to 120 f4 and the 24 to 70 f4 is differently to how Nikon's own software interprets these lenses. So they are both wide lenses. It's possible that in Capture One we could perhaps make this lens here, the 24 to 70 f4, wider by looking at the crop tool. I have jumped back into Capture One to have a look at exactly that. What happens when we open the crop tool? Because when we open the crop tool, you can see these things here. This is the crop tool. It shows us all of the image that's available. We're on the 28 to 75, keep your eye there, and well, there's not much left. If we move to the 24 to 70 2.8, we can see there's a bit more image hiding there on the sides. Really intriguing that there's more image there, even so the physical pixel dimensions don't change. Now have a look at this one. Here is the 24 to 70 f4. Keep an eye on the 66, the street number of this shop. So in this lens, we can only see the 6. In this lens, we can actually see almost all of that second 6. Now, if we change the ratio to unconstrained, suddenly there's all this extra image here. Okay, so that's that one. And again, let's look at this one. We'll go unconstrained and just grab all of it. And basically, we can just see that first 6. On this one, a second 6. And on the 24 to 120, I believe that's the widest frame, or it's the same as, because the frame appears to have moved slightly. So those f4 lenses are most definitely wider, significant. Just keep an eye on the 6 on the left over here, where I'm circling, and you can just see how much wider it is. So f4 lenses, are they easier to make wider because making something wider and getting 2.8 requires a lot more glass. It's a lot more difficult. It makes sense to me. And then we can go down here to the old F mount. We can see that it's slightly narrower than the new 24-70 2.8. Interesting stuff. So when it comes to playing with the size of your frame, just make sure that you grab your crop tool and just see if there's any extra hiding there. I'm not 100% sure why this software does this. If anyone can tell me how these parameters are chosen and why these companies choose to do this, I'd love you to let me know in the comments below. Anyway, I just wanted to show you that's where our focus point is, roughly around the B in bar, much the same on all of them as you can see here. And the other thing I wanted to show you is this. This is quite interesting. We cannot turn off the auto distortion control on these two lenses, but we can turn it off on the 2.8 lenses. Now, if we look at the 28-75 and we turn it off, you can see that just did a little warp. So it is being controlled a little bit. Let's watch it go back, and you can see there that the E, watch the E in the top left-hand corner. We can just see part of the P, and then if we control distortion, the P disappears. So that's that shot. And if we look at the 24-70 2.8, this is before distortion control. Watch the tiles here in the top left-hand corner. You can see it gets quite a lot wider, and it changes a little bit. It is a little bit curved. That's being distortion controlled. And interestingly, we talk about the 8K video not being distortion controlled on the old F lens. Well, this is now the VR70 2.8E F mount lens. And again, watch that top left-hand corner. We can turn distortion control off, and we can see it changes it. So distortion controlled is being done for stills. As I said, the use case of 8K, this can be done in firmware, but it's not being done right now. So look, it's no big deal. It's being done in stills. There it is. Really interesting to me anyway. And then here is the venerable 24-70 2.8 F class, the VR version, the final version, the current version of the F lens. There are some slight variances in color and image size, as we've seen across all of these lenses. Obviously, the 28 is a different size. Let's jump in and have a look close up. So what I'd like to look at first is actually this out of focus area in the middle. All right, let's look at these. Now, clearly the 28-75 is the softest of all of these, which is interesting. Again, we can very quickly come over here. For example, this sign is in focus. Same area on this one. We can see that's nicely in focus, and all of that's nicely in focus. So when looking at 100%, I think it's safe to say that the 24-70 is definitely a sharper lens, and we can see the difference in here quite clearly. We can see the settings are the same. They're absolutely identical. I quite like that background. It's not jittery, it's looking good. And we come through to here, and again, it is probably not quite as sharp as this one here, the 24-70, but it's definitely sharper than this one here across the board. This is the 24-120 background. I like the nature of the background here. I think that's soft. But we come through to this area here, and that's rendering pretty similarly to, I would say, the 24-70 f4. Maybe not quite as sharp, but geez, it's very similar. It is very, very similar. There's not a lot in it, but no, this one is definitely sharper in this instance. Now, I wonder if we get to the point where there can be variances in lenses, just marginal variances as we look around these frames, which we would expect as it's the most expensive. Now, here's the old F lens. Background looks fine, looks quite good. This has nice rendition and is actually perhaps feeling a little bit sharper than all the other lenses. And then this area here is definitely sharp and maybe appears to be sharper than the 24-70 2.8 Z lens, but then the writing appears to be sharper on the Z lens than the F lens. I think I would conclude out of all of these lenses that definitely the 24-70 2.8 Z lens is the sharpest. Then the other top of the range, then these four are actually, they're actually pretty close to each other. And this lens is the softest. but you do get 2.8. It is faster. What do? Do you shoot at half a second or 1/5 of a second? Do you want that extra light or do you want the extra sharpness? And that was always what this question was going to be about, always. Definitely these two lenses here are pretty interchangeable, I think, at this point. We will do another video about them specifically, but they're pretty close. They're pretty close. Firstly, I want to start by looking in the corner here. And we'll go to 100%. And I just want to show you, I grabbed two versions of this image so that we could see very clearly that this is not camera shake or any other issue. That is literally a different file. So have a look. If we look here and here, we can see a car that's moving. So that's two separate frames. Not only there do we have to look. So if we look in the corner here, absolutely identical. And you know, we are at 6.3, but as we can see, the focus point here is in the same position. And even this area here, which is probably 4 meters closer to the camera, is looking great. But 6.3 is not helping us here in this corner. Now let's move on to probably the best lens that Nikon make to cover this range. And here it is. This is the 24-70 2.8 S-class lens. And it is looking fabulous in the corner here, absolutely gorgeous, and all the way through this shot it is looking great. Just let it draw, but sharp, 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 and the loading zone is sharp. So we can clearly see here that there's a difference, and there should be a difference. They're both 2.8 lenses, they're both reasonably wide, of course, but one's twice the price. So you just simply have to make a choice. When you're going through the 28-75, do you want to be able to capture the light in the same way and it not be as sharp, but half the price? Or with this lens, you can have it all, but it costs twice as much. And in this country, it's like $1,500 to $3,000. So it's a significant twice as much. But that looks extraordinary in the corners. And then if we keep going through, here's the 24-70 f4. It looks pretty good, but it does not look as good as that one. It just doesn't. It's actually a bit softer right in the corner. But then the 24-120, now that is a really exciting lens. Have a look at how it's looking in the corners here. Look how sharp that texture looks. And we can jump back to, and let's just grab it. So this one is the 2.8 S, and this is the f4 S. They're both at 6.3, so they're both 1 second, and they're both looking very good in the corner here. There's not a lot in it. And is this one potentially sharper, or is there more contrast? I don't know, but they're very close, and this continues to represent what I'm talking about with the 24-120 f4. I think if you want a middle ground lens which gives you the optical brilliance of the 24-70 2.8 S, but it's simply an f4, I think that would be the direction I would go in, unless low light is critical for you. And remember, we're shooting at 400 ISO here on the Z9. And then finally, just as an interesting comparison, here is the good old F-mount version. Not looking as good in the corner, to be honest. Nowhere near as good. And we can call up, and even just the way that it's handling this area here with the white sheet. The settings are identical. Nothing has changed. It is a bit overexposed, so it's obviously a brighter lens. And that's fine. Not as sharp in the corner. Not a big deal. Not the end of the world. It's okay. And this lens is, I don't know, 5 or 6 or 7 years old versus a 3-year-old lens. But you can just see the technological differences. But I do have to say that this older F-mount lens is performing pretty well. This is the king for sure, and it makes sense because it's the one you pay the most money for, and it's clearly giving you the best results. Doesn't matter where you are in the frame. That is looking great. Let's have a look in the center of the frame at 6.3, and let's compare it with, on your left is the 28-75, and on your right is the 24-70. And again, you can just see in areas here like the loading sign, it's just a little bit different. There's just the sense of dimensionality, the sense of contrast, the sense of texture. It does look a little bit better to me. It does appear to be, the rendering looks better to me on the 2.8 S lens. Interestingly, the colors are very similar, although perhaps slightly richer here on the image on the left, but that might be to do more with light transmission and that there's slightly more or less light coming through. If anything, I'd say there's probably slightly more light coming through on the 2.8S. No one would complain with either of these, and I think ultimately this would be my point. If you got either of these lenses and you're doing landscape or cityscape or portraiture, you're going to get great results. And certainly you're going to get great results in the center of the lens. But it is clear that the top of the range lens is top of the range and it's worth it. And it's also pretty clear to me, if we just get rid of the 28-75 and grab this one here, wrong button, and we grab this one here, which is the 24-120. So this on the right's the 24-120. We can see the frame size is very similar. It's really quite difficult to pick much of a difference between these lenses. I do think the 24-70 2.8S is just a tiny bit sharper. It is only when pixel peeping side by side like this. And either way, you would be absolutely over the moon with either of these lenses. They both look and render spectacularly, color amazing. And we can see here that they fall out of focus in a similar way as well if we look towards the background here. So that's quite interesting. Let's have a look at, it's definitely sharper though. Look at these numbers here. These numbers here, even so this is falling a fair way back, this is sharper. This is definitely softer on the 28-75. Half the price. Don't forget that.
Okay, so here we are. We're going to do a 70mm test now. It's fine when the lenses end at 70, but half of these lenses don't end at 70. So, like this one, for example, which ends at 75. So, no, I've grabbed the wrong lens. Anyway, we're off to a good start. Beautiful. We might just change. We're going to drop down. So, we are now at 1/50th f 2.8. ISO 3200 on the 28-75 at about 70. And now we're going to drag it out of focus. And you can see in real time those bokeh bowls. Look at them go. They look pretty good. Look pretty good. Jeez, that's a very long focus throw. That's cool. Long and very slow. That's all the way. That is fully back. All right, done. Next. Just roll a few seconds of that. We are at 1/50th 2.8 ISO 3200 on the 24-70 2.8 S class. And let's drag you out of focus. Wow, much shorter focus throw. And what do we think? What do we think of the difference? They are different. All right, there's that one. All right. Now over to the lovely f4. Okay, we're at 150 f4 ISO 6400. And we're going to drag that out of focus. There you have it. And I reckon that looks pretty good. Nice. All three so far good. Is he going to kick up dust? All right, next, the 24-120 f4. Here we go. Now, let's get that to 70. And we do have a 70 marking, so that's helpful. Just waiting for the street cleaner because the audio is not going to be great, but there's the 8K video running, and we are at 1/50th f4 6400 ISO, and we're going to drag that out of focus. That's interesting. That goes out of focus much quicker. But they are lovely bokeh balls. Look at that, this little S-Class wonder. I do love this lens. It's a good one. All right, first we'll go with the 70mm 8K. There it is right there, and we are rolling. All right, 1/50th f2.8 ISO 3200 on the original 24-70 2.8 at 70mm, shooting 8K. There it is. Now we're going to drag it out of focus. goes out of focus. Now the throw on this lens is the shortest of all of them, and I think the bokeh balls are, well, they're interesting, aren't they? Oh, that's a beautiful shot. Oh my God. That's so nice. That was so awesome. Alrighty, here we are, final location for the night. We're going to be at the long end of the lenses, around 70mm. In this case, we're going to be 75 on the 28-75, and we're testing this here in a high dynamic range situation, and we're just looking to see what it does in the background there. Now, interestingly, you can see some purple there in the background, but it's actually a purple sign. So it's giving you the sense that there's chromatic aberration, but it's actually purple. So don't worry about it. So we've just shot some 8K. We're going to bring the background into focus. And I'm also going to bring down the exposure so that you can see, because we were wide open, that that's a purple dress up there. Change over to stills. It's lovely and fast. We're focusing in the dark. Like this wall here is very dark. And a little Z9 feature that I love here is the fact that we can completely turn the display off. And then when you hold down the button to shoot, you can see your settings and then they disappear, and it makes framing a pure joy. I love this camera. 1/10 f2.8 ISO 400, and we're going to take a few frames. We've got some cars and things moving in the background, which is lovely. And there we have our 3 frames. We'll just do one more. Now my tripod is ridiculously, precariously set up here for this one, because we're on the edge of a curb in order to get this lovely frame with this beautiful stencil art and the background light. Okay, that's our first lens, because what we'll be able to see here is distortion. Although we have proved earlier tonight that the distortion is being corrected in camera unless you're an F-class lens shooting video. I think we've learned. All right, that's it. We will change over now very carefully to the... Okay, now we're on the 24-70 S class. Now we're going to go all the way to 70. Oh, motorbike, let's get some video. Lovely, oh, look at that. 3. All right, now we're gonna get our 8K video. Now, it is very dark, and what I'm observing is, oh no, that focused straight away. There it is, roughly exposed correctly, and you can see it's a purple dress. Okay. That's that one done. To give you an idea, we're at 1/50th at f20 now in order to get that. If we go back, because we're at ISO 3200. This is what we do to get these awesome shots, people. All right, so we start wide video. There's some wide video. Okay, there you go. So you can see the camera that we're shooting with, which is absolutely fine that we can see that. It's kind of cool in a way. So now we're on the 24-70 f4 S-class lens. Love this lens, beautiful lens. Punches above its weight, like most of the entry-level lenses that you think that they shouldn't, but they do. All right, let's zoom in. Now we're going to 1/5 because this is an f4 lens. This is the 24-120. Again, a lens that I think as Nikon's going on here, they're working very hard on the S-class lenses, and they just keep tweaking them and they keep improving them, because I really think this thing punches above its weight. Okay, over to 8K and rolling. All right, now we're going out to the final lens, which is the, drop the ISO, because this is a 2.8, back to the 3200 that the other ones had. we're going to roll. So we are at full 70, just going to double check. Yes, we are. We're rolling some 8K. It's such a different experience working with the F lenses. It's quite interesting. The summary is for right now is these lenses have all performed really well. I can really tell the difference between Z lenses and the 1F in just how they operate, how much noise they make. I will throw myself back to the studio and we'll see how this all went. See you there.
Ultimately, the old adage, you get what you pay for, is still absolutely true when it comes to these lenses. The cheaper 2.8 is simply not as good as the more expensive 2.8. I think what's most interesting out of this 5 lens head-to-head is, yes, the Z lenses are improved, and the f4 S-Class lenses are very, very good. And perhaps the absolute sweet spot, the spot right in the middle of all of these lenses, is the 24-120 f4. I think that is, for the compact mid-zoom range, perhaps the best all-rounder. And if you want the best for image quality, it is the 24-70 2.8S. It's been so good to see you. If this is your first time here, I'd love to see you again, so please do subscribe and share. Please like. This video has been a massive undertaking, and if you feel so inclined, please think about channel membership. I'll see you very soon. Bye for now.